Good morning, students. Welcome to this online class. Today we have a new lesson for you. That is lesson number 15, Merchant of Venice. It's a very well-known, prakyat we can say, or famous drama written by William Shakespeare, a very famous playwright, poet and dramatist of the greatest writer of English literature and language, and the world's greatest dramatist. World means पूरा ये दुनिया में जो था उसे भी सबसे greatest dramatist है कौन? William Shakespeare. He has written so many poems, sonnets to his credit, and there are a lot of other dramas also he has written. I can tell you few of it: Midsummer Night's Dream, As You Like It, Othello, Merchant of Venice, Macbeth, Twelfth Night. These are some of his dramas. But now, अभी हमारे लिए है Merchant of Venice. This also is a very famous drama of William Shakespeare. And about him, two words I just wanted to know where he was born. कहाँ उसका जन्म हुआ है? He was born in April. Only the month is given. April 1564 in United Kingdom. Or then died on 23rd April 1616 in UK. That is about him, and he has his family. All that is उसका परिवार था. वो सब दूसरी बात है. लेकिन हम लोग को अभी केवल देखना है हमारा ये लेसन मर्चेंट ऑफ वेनिस. And I said to you about his other dramas and poems. Then let's come back. अभी हम लोग अपना लेसन के जाएंगे. That is the characters of this lesson. ये लेसन का कैरेक्टर्स कौन कौन है, ये ड्रामा का कैरेक्टर्स कौन कौन है. सबसे पहले है Antonio. First one, Antonio, a very rich businessman. He used to send the ships to different countries, and he used to collect money, and he was a very rich and successful businessman he was. And his friend Bassanio, the friend of Antonio, a young man who wanted to enjoy life. वो शादी करना चाहते थे एक लड़की को, that she was a very rich girl named Porshia, and he wanted to marry her, and she is the main character of this Merchant of Venice. And we have the fourth character, Shylock, a cruel Jew. Cruel माने cruel, लोग बोलते हैं ना. Unkind माने English भी से unkind person, a Jew, a Yehudi. These are the four main characters whom we will be meeting in this Merchant of Venice. So the story begins, and the Bassanio, the friend of Antonio, wanted money to enjoy life, and especially his dream was to marry his girl Porshia, and he wanted to have a lot of money for that. And he approaches, किसके पास जाते हैं अपना, हमेशा हमारा जरूरत में किसके पास जाते हैं हम लोग? अपना दोस्तों के पास जाते हैं. और अपना दोस्त के पास गया, एंटोनियो के पास गया और पैसा लिया. पैसा एंटोनियो खुशी से दे दिया, कारण हम लोग बहुत गहरे दोस्त थे, very thick and close friends. And then he said, my ship has gone. मेरा शिप दूसरा विदेश में गए हैं और वो वापस आएगा, मेरे को पैसा मिल जाएगा. तो वो खुशी से अपना दोस्त के लिए पैसा दे दिया. And then what happens? the पैसा देने के बाद किसी से वो मांग के दिया था पैसा. माने हम लोग उधार देते हैं कि नहीं? जब उधार देते हैं तो उधार देने पे दे दिया. उसका आशा क्या था? वो he hoped that he will get money when the ship या जहाज जब वापस आएगा. लेकिन क्या हुआ? वापस उसका जहाज it was drowned and he lost everything. जो एंटोनियो जो बड़ा एक सक्सेसफुल बिजनेसमैन था, he lost everything. And what happened? The man with whom the Yehudi man, the cruel Jew, जिससे वो पैसा दिया था, क्या हुआ? वो पैसा मांगने लगे. नहीं तो लोग एक कॉन्ट्रैक्ट किया था. जो कॉन्ट्रैक्ट में क्या था? जब तक वो पैसा नहीं देंगे तब तक उसका शरीर से 1 पाउंड फ्लैश माने मांस वो काट सकते थे. That was a very hard law among the people there. So they had made this contract or this agreement. जब यदि एंटोनियो पैसा वापस नहीं दे सकते हैं, एंटोनियो का शरीर से 1 पाउंड फ्लैश या जो मांस वो काट सकते हैं. That was the agreement. And then this Jew means this यहूदी आदमी तैयार था उसका शरीर से फ्लैश या मांस काटने के लिए. And then a new judge comes and who is that new judge, you know? The Porshia, she dresses as a man, just like a man. आदमी जैसा वो कपड़ा पहन करके वो आती है और ये प्रॉब्लम का सॉल्व करती है. यही है हमारा ये मर्चेंट ऑफ वेनिस का स्टोरी जो समरी है. Then they both of them, Porshia and Bassanio gets married. दोनों का शादी हो जाता है. वो लोग शादी करते हैं और जो शाइलोक जो काटना चाहते थे उसका मांस उसको कुछ नहीं मिलता है. आखिरी में वो काली हाथ चले जाता है. That is the end of the story. In next lesson we will learn about it. Students, we will read the lesson number 15, The Merchant of Venice, once again. Before that, I would like to say once again about the characters of this drama. First one, as I said, Antonio, Venice का एक धनी व्यापारी, a businessman, a kind, एक दयालु व्यक्ति थे. वो एक सच्चा दोस्त था. उसका खास दोस्त थे बसानियो, और वो एक मधुर स्वभाव का व्यक्ति था. उसके पास कई जहाज थे और वो एक धनी व्यक्ति था. वो बिजनेस करते थे. नाउ नेक्स्ट वन इज बसानियो, एक धन का खोजी व्यक्ति थे. कई लोगों से इसने पैसा उधार लिया था और ले चुके थे, और उसका दोस्त एंटोनियो से भी वो पैसा लिया था. वो एक सच्चा प्रेमी है और बहुत भाग्यदर्शी है कि उसे एंटोनियो जैसा एक सच्चा दोस्त मिला है. और बसानियो ये चाहते थे तो एक धनी औरत को शादी करे ताकि वो धनिक बन जाएंगे. और इसीलिए वो किससे शादी करना चाहते थे? पोर्शिया से शादी करना चाहते थे. न पोर्शिया के बारे में मैं 2 शब्द फिर हिंदी में ही बताना चाहती हूँ. पोर्शिया इस नाटक का प्रमुख पात्र है. वह एक धनी और अत्यंत सुंदर लड़की है. वह नाटक का केंद्र बिंदु भी है. उसकी सुंदरता पर बसानियो मोहित हो जाता है और पोर्शिया को कोर्ट में अपनी बात को बहुत विनम्रता से कहती है. जब वो कोर्ट आए और कचहरी में आए और एंटोनियो को वो बचाना चाहती थी और कहती है, वह भावपूर्ण भाषण देती है. दया या मर्सी के श्रेष्ठ गुणों की प्रशंसा भी किसने करती है? पोर्शिया ने करती. वह एक कर्तव्यनिष्ठ महिला है. वह न्यायप्रिय औरत भी है. तो पोर्शिया इतनी बड़ी व्यक्ति थी और उससे बहुत सारा गुणों से वो भरे हैं. नाउ शाइलोक के बारे में भी बच्चे 2 शब्द मैं बोलना चाहती हूँ. शाइलोक ही इज अ ज्यू या यहूदी है. वो लोगों को पैसा उधार देते हैं और क्या है उसका ब्याज बहुत ब्याज वो लेते थे. वो बहुत को माने मोहित करते पैसा के लिए. अत्यंत निर्दय झगड़ालू व्यक्ति थे वो अपने बेटी से भी परेशान है और एंटोनियो से बहुत नफरत करते थे. किसने? शाइलोक ने. और शाइलोक क्या चाहते थे? जब एंटोनियो उनसे पैसा उधार लिया था वो क्या चाहते थे? उन लोगों का कॉन्ट्रैक्ट या एग्रीमेंट क्या था? यदि एंटोनियो अपना पैसा वापस नहीं दे सकते तो उसका शरीर से 1 पाउंड फ्लैश उसने काट लेंगे. इसी एग्रीमेंट से उन लोग पैसा उधार लिए थे और उधार दिए थे. आगे बढ़ते जाएंगे हम पढ़ेंगे अभी lesson. Portia dressed herself and her maid Nerissa in men's apparel, and putting on the robes of a counselor, she took Nerissa along with her as her clerk, and setting out immediately, they arrived at Venice on the very day of the trial. The case was just going to be heard before the Duke and the senators of Venice in the Senate House when Portia entered this high court of justice and presented a letter from Bellario, in which that learned counselor wrote and presented a letter from Bellario, wrote to the Duke, saying he would have come himself to plead for Antonio, but that he was prevented by sickness, and he requested that the learned young doctor Balthasar, so called Portia, might be permitted to plead in his stead. This the Duke granted, much wondering at the youthful appearance of the stranger, who was prettily disguised by her counselor's robes and her large wig. And now began this important trial. Portia looked around her, and she saw the merciless Jew, and she saw Bassanio, but she knew her not in her disguise. He knew her not in her disguise. He was standing beside Antonio in an agony of distress and fear for his friend. The importance of the arduous task Portia had engaged in gave this tender lady courage, and she boldly proceeded in the duty she had undertaken to perform. First of all, she addressed herself to Shylock. She said that, allowing that he had a right by the Venetian law to have the forfeit expressed in the bond, she spoke so sweetly of the noble quality of mercy as he would have softened any heart, but by the unfeeling Shylock saying that it dropped as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. And how mercy was a double blessing. It blessed him that gave and him that received it, and how it became monarchs better than their crowns, being an attribute of God himself, and that earthly power came nearest to God's, in proportion as mercy tempered justice. She bid Shylock remember that as well we all pray for mercy, that same prayer should teach us to show mercy. Shylock only answered her by desiring to have the penalty forfeited in the bond. Is he not able to pay the money? Asked Portia. Bassanio then offered the Jew the payment of the 3,000 ducats as many times over as he could desire, which Shylock refusing and still insisting upon having a pound of Antonio's flesh. Bassanio begged in learned young counselor would endeavor to wrest the law a little to save Antonio's life. But Portia gravely answered that law once established must never be altered. Shylock, hearing Portia say that the law might not be altered, it seemed to him that she was pleading in his favor, and he said, Daniel is come to judgment. O wise young judge, how I do honor you! How much elder you are than your looks! Portia now desired Shylock to let her look at the bond, and when she had read it, she said, This bond is forfeited, and by this the Jew may lawfully claim a pound of flesh to be cut off by him nearest Antonio's heart. Then she said to Shylock, Be merciful, take the money, and bid me tear the bond. But no mercy would the cruel Shylock show, and he said, By my soul I swear, there is no power in the tongue of men to alter me. Why then, Antonio, said Portia, you must prepare your bosom for the knife. While Shylock was sharpening a long knife With great eagerness to cut off the pound of flesh, Portia said to Antonio, "Have you anything to say?" Antonio, with a calm resignation, replied that he had but little to say, for that he had prepared his mind for death. Then he said to Bassanio, "Give me your hand, Bassanio. Fare you well. Grieve not that I am fallen into this misfortune for you. Commend me to your honorable wife, and tell her how I have loved you." Bassanio, in the deepest affliction, replied, "Antonio, I am married to a wife who is as dear to me as life itself. But life itself, my wife, and all he could, are not esteemed with me above your life. I would lose all, I would sacrifice all to this devil here to deliver you." Portia, hearing this, though the kind-hearted lady was not at all offended with her husband for expressing the love he owed to a true friend as Antonio in these strong terms, yet could not help answering, "Your wife would give you little thanks, if she were present, to hear you make this offer." Shylock now cried out impatiently, We trifle time, I pray, pronounce the sentence." And now all was awful expectation in the court, and every heart was full of grief for Antonio. Portia asked if the scales were ready to weigh the flesh, and she said to the Jew, "Shylock, you must have some surgeon by, lest he bleed to death." Shylock, whose intent was that Antonio should bleed to death, said, "It is not so named in the bond." Portia replied, "It is not so named in the bond, but what of that? It were good you did so much for charity." To this all the answer Shylock would make was, "I cannot find it. It is not in the bond." "Then," said Portia, "a pound of Antonio's flesh is thine. The law allows it, and the court awards it, and you may cut this flesh from off his breast. The law allows it, and the court awards it." Again Shylock exclaimed, "O wise and upright judge, a Daniel is come to judgment." And then he sharpened his long knife again, and looking eagerly at Antonio, he said, "Come, prepare. Tarry a little, Jew," said Portia. "There is something else. This bond here gives you no drop of blood. The words expressed are a pound of flesh. If you shed one drop of Christian blood, your land and goods are all by the law to be confiscated to the state of Venice." Now, as it was utterly impossible for Shylock to cut off the pound of flesh without shedding some of Antonio's blood, this wise discovery of Portia's, that it was flesh and not blood that was named in the bond, saved the life of Antonio, and all admiring the wonderful sagacity of the young counselor, who had so happily thought of this expedient, plaudits resounded from every part of the Senate house. Then Gratiano exclaimed in the words which Shylock had used, "O wise and upright judge, mark, Jew, a Daniel is come to judgment." Shylock, finding himself defeated in this cruel intent, said with disappointed look that he would take the money. Bassanio rejoiced beyond measure at Antonio's unexpected deliverance and cried out, "Here is the money." But Portia stopped him, saying softly, "There is no haste. The Jew shall have nothing but the penalty. Therefore, prepare, Shylock, to cut off the flesh. But mind you shed no blood, nor do you cut off more or less than just a pound." be it more or less by one poor scruple, nay, if the scale turn but by the weight of a single hair, you are condemned by the laws of Venice to die, and all your wealth is forfeited to the Senate. Give me my money and let me go, said Shylock. I have it ready, said Bassanio. Here it is. Shylock was going to take the money when Portia again stopped him, saying, Tarry, Jew, I have yet another hold upon you. By the law of Venice, your wealth is forfeited to the state for having conspired against the life of one of its citizens, and your life lies at the mercy of the Duke. Therefore, down on your knees and ask him to pardon you. The Duke then said to Shylock, that you may see the difference of our Christian spirit, I pardon you your life before you ask it. Half it belongs to Antonio, the other half to the state. The generous Antonio then said that he would give up his share of wealth to his daughter and her husband, for Antonio knew that the Jew had an only daughter who had lately married against his consent to a young Christian named Lorenzo, a friend of Antonio's. This had so offended the Shylock that he had disinherited her. The Jew agreed to this, and being thus disappointed in his revenge and despoiled of his riches, he said, I am ill, let me go home. Send the deed after me, and I will sign over half of my riches to my daughter. The Duke now released Antonio and dismissed the court. He then highly praised the wisdom and ingenuity of the young counselor and invited him home to dinner. Portia, who meant to return to Belmont before her husband replied, I humbly thank your grace, but I must be away directly. The Duke said he was sorry he did not have time to stay and dine with him. Turning to Antonio, he added, Reward this gentleman, for in my own mind you are much indebted to him. The Duke and his senators left the court. Then Bassanio said to Portia, Most worthy gentleman, I and my friend Antonio have by your wisdom been from this day acquitted of grievous penalties, and I beg you will accept of the 3,000 ducats due unto the Jew, and we shall stand indebted to you over and above, said Antonio, in love and service evermore.